It's a Hawkeye Nation. If you weren't sure, I just want to let you know that the Hawks rock and Cyclones are good too, but they didn't win the football game. That probably just turned off half of the viewers right there.
Click.
Forget
season 2. I don't need it.
I'm an Iowa fan of the state first, but also of the Hawkeyes next. So
I'm a Cyclone fan, even though I'm not wearing a Cyclone shirt. I mean, they didn't win, so
you can't.
I still could.
A real fan, right? Or those real fans out there. Not that you're not a real fan. You should wear your stuff even after a loss, right?
Yeah,
because that shows you're a real fan,
right?
In the highs and the lows.
Yeah, through the lows.
Sickness and in health.
I don't even know if I have that much Iowa State gear. Like, I might have a sweatshirt or something.
Hopefully someone gives you something at some
point. I'm very, loosely, committed, devoted kind of fan. It's like, you ask me, I've got an opinion, but not a strong one.
Just to football in general.
Yeah, kind of.
You're not a diehard.
No. I mean, most sports, I would say I'm just not, it's not my thing as much. Like, I'll watch a game, I'll play, if there's people playing or something. I don't know. It's just not me as much. I don't know. You?
I mean, I don't know. I was born into it, kind of bred to play sports. And I call myself a townie a lot, in the office and adjusting people. Like, a lot of farmers come in, and I learn a lot about farming. It's like, wow, I cannot believe how much I didn't know before. And so my excuse, it's not really excuse, it's just my line, my funny line is, hey, I'm a townie. I've got a lot to learn. And so being in town, it's like, okay, if I'm not going to go out and work, or I don't have chores that take up time, then I'm going to throw a ball around. Or I feel like that was the default. Sisters were athletes.
Physical activity.
Yes,
yeah,
for sure. Dad was an athlete. Mom was an athlete. So that's what we did. Played sports.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah. We weren't so much that way. My sisters are actually pretty athletic. I mean, both of them, Lizzie, she played soccer and basketball and bunch of sports all the way up through high school, and Addie, she's active. I think she's playing volleyball and she's cheering and stuff now, but I don't know, it just wasn't really part of our upbringing. So my dad, when I was younger, he did a lot of hunting and fishing and outdoor stuff, and so I kind of got that from him, but not so much the sports line. He didn't come home and want to watch a sport game. He'd go outside and mow his lawn or something like that. So it was just a different different way of filling free time, I guess. But
then how did your sisters get into it then?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think Lizzie got into it because she had friends. I mean, which is a testament to the power of who you hang out with.
Right.
I mean, I think that's really kind of where that started. She had friends that were playing, pee-wee soccer or whatever. So she started playing with them, and yeah, she was athletic. She was quick and, a good athlete. So she took it up and did it. And I think that kind of made a way really for the family. Almost through her, the rest of the family came more towards sports. I make this joke sometimes, my dad now, he loves going to football games on Friday nights. I'm where was that when I was growing up? We never went to any sports. And now he's he talks about football, and I'm who are you? I go to college, come back, and you're you're a sport guy now? What?
Funny.
I don't know, but people change over time, and when you're around stuff, I guess you get into it. And probably if I was around sports stuff a lot more, I bet I'd be more into it. So I'm just not.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
There it is.
Right on. So people do change, right? I mean, people can change, because that's an old thought. I feel there's movies and pop culture and media about whether people can, or if you only are what you'll ever be now, And so you might be something in the future, but it's because you've got it in you now. And there's other things you don't got in you now, so you're never going to be that. I don't know. I feel you could pretty much get anywhere you wanted.
I feel that has to be the case. I mean, if it's not, then I don't understand why we try to do, education or improvement of any kind. Because if you are what you are and that's it, I mean, what's the point of going to school or,
right.
Learning skills or, career development? I mean, I don't know. I feel that thought of, you are who you are. You can't change somebody. I don't think that's realistic. But I do think environment plays a huge part of that. And if you want to see a change, I think sometimes you have to start by changing your environment and what you're around, because, this kind of gets into a discussion about habits, I guess, but it can be hard to create new habits or a new lifestyle if you're living every part of your life the same way. It's you're going to easily fall back into your default unless you're moved into something new.
Makes me think of a lot of like previous conversation we had with Audrey Highnote, who was a guest early on, and her growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and what that leads into, and just, you know, having the mindset that you can grow and you can change is like a totally different approach to problem solving, which, such as life, is one big problem to solve, you know? And so if you were fixed and you thought you were stuck all the time, I mean, it would make life maybe a little bit more difficult approaching life with that mindset versus coming at it with like let's see what I can do. Yeah. Which is,
I've got what I've got and that's all I've got.
That would be tough.
That would be tough.
That would be tough.
It reminds me of our conversation about the Titanic and adaptability, and like when you're so fixated on this one direction, this one thing, one goal, like that you can't adapt in any way. I mean, you're going to end up sinking, or
right.
And that was the case for them.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the growth mindset's huge. And, you know, you said something in your little funny line about being a townie. Like the way you phrased that, you're like, hey, I'm learning, I'm a townie. It just made me think, like, what a great thing to be in a position where, you know, you see somebody, you encounter someone totally different than you, and your first response isn't to like get defensive at what you don't know, or, you know, push back or try to like impose what you know upon someone else. It's like, hey, show me something, teach me something, you know, tell me what I don't know, because I'd like to know. Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a huge asset to the way you live, to like be looking to grow in knowledge. Like I've heard it phrased as like being a lifelong learner. I think that's important.
100%. 100%. Which
there's always new lessons to learn.
There are, right. And the moment you stop doing things to learn, I think that will create kind of a habit that will become a problem. Yeah. Which this now reminds me of a Jocko podcast that he just put down. And anxiety and depression is a mega loaded topic. But it's at the end of the day, he talked about how people who go out and do things tend to not be in such a stuck pattern of depression and anxiety. Is that when you're really stuck, it's like you stop doing things, and that perpetuates the cycle even further, you know? But it's when you're willing to learn, and you kind of have that humbleness that I don't know everything, and there are things that I would like to learn because it would really enhance my life and other people's life, which reminds me about what you're doing a lot at your acreage, which we'll get into there, you know? Yeah. Because I feel like you're constantly learning and doing things and trying to create opportunities and experiences for other people, which I admire about you too. But
hey, I feel the same. I mean, you know, they haven't seen your landscaping job up in the backyard, but this guy like leveled off a bunch of ground and got some new landscaping stones and put in some nice, you know, soil and seeded some grass.
I don't have a green thumb, but I want a nice yard.
Yeah,
I want it bad right now.
Desire will drive you to learn.
It will, and it is.
And you know, there's something to be said there for, you know, that desire to learn new things and do new things and recognize there's stuff I don't know how to do, but I'd like to be able to do it. I think there has to be a motivation to like step out to get to the place where you are learning, where you are growing, or you're in an uncomfortable situation. Because I feel like often, at the start at least, it can be really uncomfortable to be like the one person who has no idea what's going on. I mean, I feel like we've all been there in some way or another, and at first it can really be uncomfortable because it's like, well, they all know what they're talking about. I don't have a clue what that means. And that can be discomforting for a while, but like you almost have to get at a place where you're comfortable just like not knowing what's going on and being okay with starting there, recognizing that I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to learn and grow because I've got this thing driving me to learn how to do. Like you said, I want a nice yard. You know, like if we talk about the projects I've got going on, a lot of what I'm learning to do is because I want to save a couple $1,000s in labor. And if I can do it, I tell my wife this, and I feel like she doesn't always appreciate it, but I say to her, like, I have a really hard time paying someone else to do something that I think I could do.
Sure.
And so it's just a matter of bridging the gap between what I know how to do and what I think I know how to do or could know how to do. How do I get from here to there and make up this difference of knowledge? And it's a lot of YouTube. It's a lot of talking to people who know more than me.
Sure.
It's a lot of trial and error. I mean, to be honest with you, like,
how's it going?
Like, what I'm doing right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm digging in a new water system at my acreage because this spring I had a cast iron line buried 6 feet underground that had 2 holes rust through in the bottom of it. And so like springs here, I go out and I'm like mowing for the first time. I don't even know. Maybe I wasn't mowing. Maybe I was just like driving through my yard, like looking at stuff. And I see this puddle next to my shed, and there shouldn't be a puddle there. Like there's no water in the shed. It's not a low spot in the yard. It's just a weird place for there to be water. I don't normally go in that shed, but I thought I probably need to go check this out. So I open it up, and there's like a lake in my building.
This was recent, or
this was this spring?
Okay, yes.
This was in the spring.
I remember this. Yep.
Like the day before the bachelor party.
Yes.
Which is hilarious because I told you, like, you were like wanting to like get together that night before the bachelor party and just like hang out and like a sauna or something. And I was like, I don't know, man. I got to get this thing fixed. And so I think I remember it was like we were going to go meet up and do something. And like right before that, I am in overalls in my shed, like waist deep in dirt with a spade in my hand. And I thought to myself, like, I'm Dwight Schrute. What a horrible realization.
The Dwight moment. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what he would be doing right now. He'd be like out podunking something in his, whatever. Anyway, so I've got this huge problem, this like lake in my building, and I borrowed this excavator from a guy, and I dug down and found the pipe, patched the pipe up. But I'm left with this issue of realizing that cast iron, the spot it rusted is fixed for now, but there's still, hundreds of feet of pipe underground, and any part along there could rust out at any moment, and then I'm stuck in the same situation. And what my real motivation to get it done this summer before I have another issue was that if it happened in the middle of winter when the ground is frozen, I would not be able to dig under, and I would just be stuck with, leaking water all over my acreage. And so that was kind of a scary thought.
Sure.
So it drove me to find a solution and, just to be real, like to hire somebody to come out and dig 400 feet of trench in a yard. I mean, I guess I didn't price it out, but I don't think it's cheap. And I kind of liked running the excavator when I dug the first hole. So I thought, I'll figure out how to do this. I'll figure out the fittings, and I'll get it done. So that's what I'm doing now. I've spent the last couple of days this weekend digging about 400 foot of trench. It's like 5 to 6 feet deep. And then just laying new plastic PEX tubing throughout the yard and attaching fitments.
You're digging into where there's nothing. It's not like you're trying to find piping.
Well, there is some of that too. Like when I get close to the buildings, I actually want to hit the pipe with my bucket so that I can attach onto some old stuff.
Okay.
So like I want to attach where the old fitment goes into the building. I want to attach the new stuff to where that's at.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's like a little bit of trying to find it, but mostly it's just digging a hole.
But not destroying it, because that would be bad.
Well,
or if you're not going to use it, then theoretically you can just kind of bust it up.
I mean, some of it can get destroyed, but like when it gets close to the building, I mean, like you want to preserve that enough so that you can actually attach the new piece to the part that's already there. So
a new water line, correct?
New water lines,
Not sewage, not septic, just...
No, but, we kind of started this conversation talking about gaining experience, right? Like bridging what I know to, what I think I could know. And in my bridging that gap on this project, I definitely dug up my septic line. I hit it with the bucket while I was digging yesterday. And so like I'm digging along, and all of a sudden I hear this like crunch, and I see all of this white PVC coming up in the dirt, and I think, oh no. I knew it was the septic line. Ooh. And that just meant that I had to learn a new skill. I had to learn how to patch PVC and, glue it all up and get the coupler in so that my septic will flow on down the line.
Okay.
Hey, you asked, man.
This is okay.
It's real life. This is what I'm learning.
Right on.
So
it's got to get out somehow.
It does.
You flush it, and it's got to go somewhere.
It does.
Yep. And then it goes from that piping to some main line along the highway.
Do you want to know? I mean, do you want me to tell you how it works?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a townie. I don't know these things.
Right. Well, I was a townie till 2 years ago.
Sure. Well, you're not anymore.
I guess not.
You're overall deep right here.
That's true. So on a septic system, you flush your toilet or your sink, all the wastewater kind of goes to the same place. It all goes to the same place. And so it flushes down the pipes. And then in my basement, I have a pipe that goes out the foundation, and that runs kind of to where the old tank was, and then it's got a curve, and then it comes back to a new septic tank. And so in town, it's different. In town, it like all runs to a main line that the city manages, and it goes to like a waste treatment plant.
Right.
In the country, we don't have that.
Right.
In the country, we've got our own little waste treatment plant, and it's just a big holding tank. And so basically what happens is all of that sewage runs into the tank, and then it'd be called like the hard materials. They stay in that tank until it's full, and then you hire a truck to come out and pump it out, and then they carry it all wherever they take it.
How often does that have to happen?
Oh, not that often. Oh, I mean, I guess it depends on how much you have to go. I mean, to be honest with you, like once a year?
Once
No,
a year?
that's not accurate. Not like for, I mean, us two. No, it doesn't have to.
Have you had to do it yet?
No, we have not had to do it yet, and I had it replaced like a year ago. So
Okay.
no, it doesn't have to happen every year. It's about how big your tank is, because that determines how much it can hold, and then it's also about how many people are in the house. So like.
Right.
There's code with it, like a house, like my house is a 4-bedroom house, and 2-bath. And so there's like a number, there's an equation they use to figure out how big of a tank you need to have for that. And so it's like until it fills up, you just kind of let it go. And then so that's the hard stuff. And then the effluent, which is just like the wastewater. It's all the liquid.
Sure.
It runs out into what they call a leach field, which is like, it's this plastic material that has like little holes in it. And so this water runs down that, and then it seeps into the ground, and the ground filters it out.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And it just becomes minerals in the earth.
I guess.
In like, where does that happen at? Like
Down in the soil.
just somewhere.
Down in the dirt.
Under
man.
a field? Under something? Or under
Like mine's in my backyard.
Oh, okay.
So
And you like know where that is in your yard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like such a minimal amount, and it's spread out over
yeah.
so far. I mean, like it's not something, unless something's broken, it's really wrong. Like you're not going to have like sewage on the
Ever.
surface of your yard.
How
No,
deep?
that shouldn't happen.
How deep is that?
Oh, it's probably buried like 6 feet down. I mean, it's buried pretty deep, so it won't freeze. I mean, that's the thing with all of these water and all that kind of stuff. Like electric, gas, it can be buried a couple feet below the surface, but when you get to water, you have to consider the frost line, which is how far down it freezes in the winter. And in Iowa, that number is 58 inches. So that's 5 foot 10 inch, I think. Yeah, so 6 foot.
4'10". Yeah.
Yep.
Wild.
Oh, yeah, it'd be 4 foot 10, right? About 5 foot.
So how do you know when the hard material tank is full? Where does that alert come from?
I guess you just got to keep an eye on it or get it pumped once a year, like Taylor
man.
said. She looked it up. 3 to 5 years
That's
is what
the
they
average
recommend.
life expectancy of one of those hard material tanks.
I mean, it's a pretty big tank. I forget the size, but I mean, I feel like it's thousands of gallons.
Wow.
I mean, it's big.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's just underground somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is part of, like, if you build a house out on an acreage or out in the country, this is part of it goes in.
Yep.
And there's a line, and it takes it out a little ways from your house, and then, wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's something, man.
It is something.
And it changes over time. Because, like, when I bought the house, it had a tank, but it was a tank that was not up to code anymore. So when you buy a property, you have to bring that stuff up to code when it changes hands. And so I had to, pay to, I wasn't ready to do that job on my own yet. So
No.
I paid someone
Got
else to put the septic system in.
Would you do it now?
I don't know. I thought about that the other day while I was digging. I might
like-
try it.
Well, this is all reminding me of, we have a shared experience this summer of going to living history farms.
Yeah.
Which I think everyone in Iowa at least should go to this. But it reminds me of the 3 settlements that we went to, because there's the 1700s Indian, because that's who was in Iowa, was
The
the Indian
Iowa.
tribes, correct, the Iowa. And but then there was what was the second one? Was like a prairie 1840s kind of estate.
It was like the log cabin was next.
Yes.
It was just an old log cabin with
Yep.
a smokehouse and a chicken coop. It was like all they had.
Right.
That was probably my favorite one. Might have been my favorite one.
I think, okay.
I really liked the people that were in there. They were very knowledgeable, and they shared a ton of information.
What a great feature of Living History Farms to have people, who have studied that era and then are in like the uniform of the 1840s and then are just like sitting there in a rocking chair with a cat on her lap, just answering our questions while they have a stoked fire going and
and they're
floor
like drinking coffee they made on the stoked fire, like the way that it would have been back then.
With a ghetto coffee grinder.
Yeah.
Where you've got to like crank it and then, wow.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, and she even talked about, like the lady there, she talked about in the winter, like how they still go out there and it just like is terrible because like it's so cold in there and that fireplace doesn't, I mean, it's just not insulated well. So it's like, it still gets cold.
That blew my mind how she said maybe 3 to 6 feet away from the fire, you're at like 40 degrees.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the cabin is basically you're out of the wind chill, but it's as cold as it is outside.
Yeah.
What a crazy way to live back then.
And it wasn't that long ago.
No, right. Like 150 years is what we're talking about. In the grand scheme of history.
Short time.
Short. When you think about year 1000 and the Roman Empire and Caesar, when all of that was going on, like they were living more sophisticated than middle America in 1800.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which is just wild. But, you're establishing a whole continent in a country. Like, it's going to take time, which is also another wild thought, is there has never been a continent or a country established faster than probably, North America.
Well, probably not with the size of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pioneering spirit of Americans. It's incredible.
We just blew up. Correct. Yeah. But then in our Living History Farms, then we go to, it was around 1900, right?
Yeah.
Or
I think so.
1900, the year 1900, or is it early teens?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but it was somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. And then the tour guide said, oh, you'll be looking around thinking, wow, this is pretty nice. Like, they've come a long ways. And then he said, but just look at what you're not seeing. And one of those things was there was no bathroom in the house.
Yeah.
And it's just this outhouse that's sitting out over there. It's like, here we have this, like, relatively simple sewage system, now. But, like, back 100 years ago, it was still a hole in the ground. And that's where it went. And when that filled up, you probably could smell it and you knew it and you just moved it to somewhere else on the farm,
Yeah.
Which is just, blows my mind.
Glad you're not living in those days.
I almost wish that was part of like high school education, is when you're a senior, you had to, like, you and a little classmates with some supervision. I wouldn't want to just throw you to the wolves, but it's like, you need to go live on a place like this for a week just to appreciate like modern era. No phones, no internet, no nothing. Like, okay, there's a truck there if you need to get into town and
like emergencies only.
Right.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be an idea? That'd be a heck of an educational experience.
It would. This whole conversation really reminds me of something I heard Jordan Peterson say one time in an interview he was doing. It was about sexism, and I'm not trying to make a positional statement on that right now, but I think what he was trying to communicate, somebody asked, well, don't you think that women have just been oppressed like for all these years?
If you heard that's real life going on upstairs.
That's right.
There's a baby crying maybe, but or
dog running.
Dog running. Yeah. Anyway.
So what he says about this, because this person's real fired up about, haven't these people been oppressed for so long? He said, until about the last 100 years, men and women and children and everybody was just trying to survive. Like, there was not time to figure out who's doing a little bit more, like who's slightly more oppressed, who's a little bit more of a victim than someone else. He's like, everybody was just trying to survive because life was hard, really hard. And, I think Living History Farms, like, in a way it communicates that, especially like that log cabin exhibit. To me, it's like they just had to be a team. I mean, husband, wife, kids. I mean, it was one big team just trying to make it through the winter.
Right.
Because if someone doesn't pull their weight, you don't make it.
Right.
And then you're all dead.
Right.
So it's like, it's hard. Life for many, many years, thousands of years, was really brutal. And I almost think because in so many ways we enjoy comforts and, conveniences today, it's like we miss out on, some of that, I don't know, spirit of getting through it. We almost like become too concerned about things that aren't as important. Like, we almost have to like find things to like fight about or find things to like get fired up about because we're like bored with life.
That was another comment that Jocko made, is people who sit around and think too much, they start getting kind of like what you're saying. They find things to be aggravated about or fearful about or excited about. And that's why back to the original conversation is football is so big, because we now have time to watch football and to play football versus 100 years ago. That was a luxury, and you certainly weren't doing it out in the prairie.
Yeah.
And 1820s, 1840s, when part of this was they would build one house to just sleep and survive in while they built their new house.
Well, they built the barn first, is what they said. They said, no, we got to take care of the animals, got to take care of the crops. And then, like, after everything else is done, we'll build ourselves a house.
So they're sleeping or living in a lean-to while you build the palace for your animals. And then, and so they said the one that they were in was their third or fourth rendition of what they were living in. And that blew my mind.
What a different approach, like, to life, that I'm going to take care of all of these other things first, and then I'll get to myself last. And like, and not just because, they were just such good people. It was like, you didn't have a choice. Like, if your animals die, you're dead. If your crops rot, you're dead.
Right.
So
you better just hightail it back east, or else.
Like, take care of your supplies, get your stuff together, and then, grit your teeth and bear it, because it's going to be hard for a while.
What a crazy way. And I'm in no way saying I want to go back there, but like
a
different.
taste, like get a taste
just
of it.
Get a taste, and at least appreciate it for what it was, and then just kind of revel in what we have right now. And
well, even like for me, I'm doing this whole water project. It's like, I'd be a fool to think that me doing that is equivalent to like roughing it like they did. I'm using a mini excavator that I borrowed from a guy, runs on diesel, and digs, like 3 cubic feet of dirt at every scoop. Like, if I was doing that by hand, I'd be down there for 5 months or more trying to dig this water line in. So it's like, I think in every way, we experience convenience, and it's a good thing. We get a lot more done.
It is.
No doubt about that. Like, I can knock this out in a weekend. It would have taken them half a year to do it by hand,
right,
or not possible.
Right.
So it's like, in some ways it's good, but I guess I think it's good if you use the convenience, if you use technology, if you will, to become more efficient, and not to use it as a means to laziness, or just like, releasing yourself from working. It's like the 40-hour work week. That's another thing I've heard people talk about before. Like, that wasn't something that wasn't a thing until pretty recently. I don't know if you could look that up, like when the 40-hour work week became a thing, but I think it was like in the last 100 or 200 years. Like, until then, people were just working, ridiculous hours, again, just to survive.
Sure. Yeah. I'm sure it started, industrial revolution to some degree. And I'm sure 40 hours was 80 hours or whatnot.
Yeah.
Until, the assembly line. Ford versus Ferrari. Ford. Great movie. Yeah.
1940.
Yeah.
So like World War II era.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure out of necessity of, we need this amount to go out or else we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's going to take this many hours, so we're going to schedule it 8 to 5 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was probably more than that. It was probably like, 6 to 7.
I'm sure.
I bet, brutal hours, I'm sure. And even like weekends, I don't know when people started taking 2-day weekends, but I don't know. It's just, life's been tough in history, in times.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm like taken back by that thought. Like, you are living in the best time of any time in history. As far as what you're able to do, you can really do a lot of stuff today just because of the means that are available. And I think, am I making use of that?
Yeah.
I find myself like up against that question often. Am I taking advantage of the gift that I have of being born in America in the 2000s? Well, I was born in the 90s, but living in the 2000s in America, like, what a gift. What an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
What am I doing with it?
Yeah.
So,
what are we supposed to do with it? Or is that the wrong question? Because I hesitate to say should or supposed to do, because you don't have to do anything. One of my favorite quotes is, the only thing you have to do is die one day. You know,
It's a weird favorite
it
quote, man.
Well, I know. Just maybe I should say it's not a quote.
It's a good quote or whatever it is.
It's a paradigm shift. Is what I think. That's what it was to me.
Makes you think.
Yes, I don't have to do anything. You don't even have. Yeah, you don't even have to. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to work.
No. You don't have to get out of bed.
Right. And society maybe has expectations, or there's expectations or standards that you've put on yourself, those are good.
Yeah.
Everyone should have those, or else you're just kind of floundering without those standards and priorities is what I wrote down here. But yeah, you don't have to do anything. So the fact that we get to do all of this stuff with modern day technology of the 2000s and the 21st century is, well, by golly, we should do something.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to decide to stick around in this place, then you've got to do something. And so you can either spend your time trying to be constructive or.
Yeah.
But that's an intro to the conversation of what should you do? Well, you should do something if you're going to live. I mean, you got to have something to do. You got to have something to, fill up the time, or else. There's a movie, I cannot remember it, but it's with, maybe it's the actor that was in Sons of Anarchy, which I never really watched that show. But Charlie Hunnam, he was a guy, and he escaped from prison, except before he escaped from prison, he went into solitary confinement twice. The first time was for 2 years, and the second time was for 5 years, if I remember. And in the movie, the warden is surprised that this guy is still alive after 5 years, because he says most people don't survive that because they can't take the isolation, like no human contact, no nothing. You can't do anything. You literally have a room and you sit there and you have nothing. You don't have books. You don't have anything, and like without something to do, you die in a way. Like motion is life, movement is life. And if you can't move, if you can't do things, if you can't like use it's over. But this guy had hung on to enough hope that he was able to survive the 5 years. He had something that said 5 years is coming, and eventually I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah.
Versus 5 years is a long time, where I'm sure a lot of people, it's like, I can't make it.
That's a very long time.
And I don't even know how you die, because it's not like your heart gave out in that time frame. I mean, these are young men, but it's like you just lovesick, or how they say some people die of your broken heart. Maybe it had something to do with that. I don't know, but
I don't know. I wonder. I mean, I'm sure that has just an incredibly terrible effect on the mind, and I would think when the mind gets to a certain place, it probably begins to affect other things. I mean, like, well, you're a chiropractor. You talk a lot about the nervous system and the communication, and I wonder.
Yeah.
What happens, when you are isolated for that long. I mean, taking like any self-harm scenario aside, I would think just if you get to a place where you're so, bad in the mind because of the situation you're in, I would think there could be, responses throughout your body to that.
Yeah, 100%. And depression, major depression, I mean, that's a chemical imbalance in your brain, to think of like what that is doing chemically to the rest of your body. Yeah, there's stuff that can go wrong.
Sickness is a brewing.
Yes. And it's not like you're eating well. So you're malnourished and
or being active.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in a little box, I mean, what you can do push-ups.
And if you're not even being nourished enough, I'm sure you do 5 and then you're just exhausted.
Yeah, probably.
So I'm sure that's part of it, is from malnourishment and all that sort of stuff, you get sick.
Yeah.
And then that you get infected and no one's giving you medicine. So it's just lights out at some point.
And I mean, if you don't have the will to live, I think that plays a part in it too. And I feel like if you're in that situation and you're, sick, malnourished, just in a really bad physical condition or mental condition, I mean, how hard are you really going to hold on? I mean, I would think most people wouldn't. It's an interesting, in a movie situation. I don't know if that was a true story or not, but
apparently it was. Pompilon. I'm butchering it, man, but I'd have to look it up.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
Very interesting.
We just had the hope of freedom.
Right. Right. Then after that, if you somehow survive that, you would get banished to an island away from the prison, And then, I mean, there's no escape. It was just surrounded by water. So if you jump in, you're probably going to drown and die. And it's just this little community of people that had been banished and exiled to this island. And
Wow.
yeah. And it was like, go fend for yourself. Go survive. Good luck. You know?
Like, we tried to kill you legally, but we couldn't. So
Right.
now you just got to go be by yourself.
And when you die, you die.
People.
Mhm.
Wow.
For sure.
Tough.
Yeah. But he escaped from that.
The island.
He made a raft. Yeah. And somehow floated to someplace.
When you've got the drive to figure something out.
For sure. He had a will to live. And I think there was a girl involved.
Hmm.
But, I mean, this was a girl that he didn't see for decades. So I
Sure.
don't think there was a reunion. It wasn't like a super happy ending. It was not a feel-good film. But I'm sure it just, for the sake of the conversation, there was
Sure.
something that kept hope alive
Yeah.
for him. And he had a life after and wrote a book and, yeah. got
Interesting.
famous. Yeah. Based
I'll
on a true
have to look
story.
that up.
Yeah.
It'd be an interesting book, I would think.
Yeah.
It's just like an autobiography. Not sure.
We'll have
Yeah,
to look
well,
it up.
That's interesting.
It is. It is. I mean, that's what happens if you don't do anything.
Right.
Eventually, you're going to waste away. So I suppose I would say that you should do something while you're here.
Yeah.
If you're going to do something, then it should be meaningful.
What do you think the hesitancy to like start doing something is? I mean, do you think it's just the intimidation of like something new? Or is it, I don't know. I mean, is it just not knowing where to start?
I know that's for me. That's one for me is I become immobilized when I don't know what to do. So I freeze and kind of just stay in place. And that's something I've had to, I recognize that I'm doing this and I just need to do something
Yeah.
to move out of this place or else I'm just going to get stuck there. Yeah, I know that's me. I think fear is a big one.
Yeah.
Fear of the future, fear of the unknown. It's huge. That would keep you from doing something. I think the more I read and study things in spiritual health, especially, which is one of the big topics we talk about, is the health topic, how it's physical, mental, and spiritual. I'm fascinated with spiritual health. I think I know you are as well, and both shame and guilt are two things that I think cripple people. And
Yeah, it's definitely true.
right, things that require healing, or else it creates this kind of habit of thinking that changes how you respond to something in the future,
Sure.
which changes a result or an outcome sometimes.
Right.
Because this thing hasn't been healed or recovered from. Hasn't been reconciliation for something that has created shame or guilt.
Well, it's like what I preached on this morning about, being blinded by condemnation. It's in 2 Corinthians 3, if anybody wants to go look it up.
For sure.
But yeah, when you're seeing, through this, it's really distortion of condemnation, or we could call it shame or guilt, which are both results of condemnation. Like, I've been condemned, so I'm full of shame. I'm guilty of this, So it's like when you're looking at, if we're talking about your relationship with God, which I think is where people get off in spiritual health, it's like I have a skewed perspective of God, and I think that is the reason, is because like I'm not seeing clearly. I'm distorted by this past experience, and it's partially a forgiveness issue. I mean, it's really understanding the forgiveness that we have in Christ, like that the payment has been fully made for my sin. I mean, like, God's not waiting to punish me because the punishment has been poured out on Christ, and I am free and clear, righteous child of God. So, there's a little 2-minute sermon for everybody, but like, it's that perspective and seeing accurately what the situation is. So yeah, for health, seeing accurately is important.
Yeah. I love it. I love every bit of it. And it reminds me of a quote that says, got lots of quotes. What you think about God is the most important thing about you, because it's an approach, to how you see God.
Yeah.
What you think about him is an approach of how you relate to him, which is a big point of the relationships topic that we talk about, which relationships are me, others, and with Creator. Why I'm here. That's a relationship. And so what you think about that person dictates a lot about you. But then this is reminding me of a book we just read called The Cure, which by an author I've never heard of, Bruce McNichol. I would recommend it because it talks about that approach to God and being blinded by shame and guilt. And it skews you coming forward to
Yeah.
God. And then it affects a lot of things. And then when that relationship is not whole, it affects how you go towards other people because you're responding to them in a pattern of something that has hung you up before because you don't think God or the Creator is enough for you to be whole and to be well.
Right.
And it's a messy situation.
Yeah. Well, I not knowing, belief, I mean, I feel like it would be such a confusing way to live. And maybe there are people who live that way and don't feel like it is, but I feel like it'd be so confusing to not have like a definite, like not changing, not just, I mean, like this is it. I mean, that to me is a great sense of security and confidence and being able to like go back to, well, the Bible and to God. And I mean, for me, like going there is such a confidence thing and such a stabilizing factor of my life that I don't know what I would do without that.
Because it tells you where you came from, where you're going, who you are.
Yeah, what I'm here for, how I relate to others. I mean, how I react to things. I mean, like even as I look at myself through the Word, it's like I can determine things about what's going on in me. I can determine, well, what I've been thinking about and how that affects things, how I'm either conformed to the image of the world or transformed into the image of Christ. Like all of that, it's all part of life, and it's all, certain because I feel like it's so clear in the Word. So like for me, I feel like it'd be really difficult to not have that relationship with God solid, but also all of those principles set firmly in place. Because if I didn't have that, I mean, I'd be looking, I'd be questioning. I feel like I'd be confused about life. I mean, I'd have questions all the time, and I'd be constantly wondering, from one thing to another, which is right. I mean, there's such a peace in knowing that I believe the truth, or, I've got it and I don't have to look for something else. It's like, there's such a calm about that. Like I'm settled.
Which is an excellent segue into, like, I don't think anyone would argue that life is crazy right now. Like society and mandates, and you never know what tomorrow is going to bring or what might be going on in some part of the world. Yeah. Like stuff is happening, life is crazy. And I heard statistics recently about how like depression and anxiety are way up right now. And like substance abuse is way up right now. It's like people are trying to cope.
Yeah.
Because life is crazy and it's hard. And there's a lot of people, life is changing, and I can't remember what they are, but there's like the 5 biggest stressors, and moving is one of them. And getting married or getting divorced is another one. And like having a kid is another one. And, like imagine doing all of those things with the uncertainty about what tomorrow would be. Mm-hmm. And it's the quote from another Jocko podcast is about how there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where it feels like decades happen, which is just an amazing imagery of, I feel like, what we're going through now, but then through, some of these key times in life. And this podcast specifically was looking at the year 1917, which was pivotal in the World War I scene changing, because early in that war, I mean, the German and that allegiance that went with them was like dominating and changing the landscape of Eurasia. And then it was a couple things happened in 1917 where that tide changed, and eventually America got into the war, I think, at the end of that year, right? Which was actually, they had a way bigger role supplying Britain than they did actually like fighting until the end. Yeah. But we're in one of those times right now where in a week or a month, there a lot is happening.
Right. Well, in that same podcast, that interview, they talked about like the 70s and the 60s, and how, you could ask the numerical answer, when did the 60s begin and end? And you could say, oh, well, January 1st, 1960. And then it ended, December 31st, 1961. But what they said about it is like, well, really, like it happened the day that I think it was Kennedy got shot. Yeah. It was like, that's when everything changed. Like the way people looked at other people, looked at their country. I mean, it was like the happy-go-lucky days of the 50s were now over in, like, I think it was 1963 or something like that.
You're exactly right.
So it was like, that period changed. And so you could ask, like, when did the, 2010s end? It's like, well, I think it was like March 14th, 2020, like when everything shut down, and 500 days later, we're still, 15 days to the cure or whatever it was. It's like, here we are a year and a half after that.
Right.
Just kind of still in this different world. I mean, because it is different now. I mean, people don't look at each other the same anymore, and people don't look at their governors and their elected officials the same anymore, and they don't look at healthcare system the same. Like, I don't care what side of anything you're on. Like, you don't look at anything the same as you did before 2020.
Yeah.
Because now it's like you either believe everything or you question everything, or I don't know, you're somewhere in between, but it's different.
I feel like it was like 2008 was when this last decade happened.
Like the recession, or the housing crisis.
Yeah. Something then happened. That was a pivotal thing that changed life for a lot of people. And then I think of like even pop culture and movies, how the Mission Impossible movies, and then the second one happened in 2002, and the third one happened later in 2006 or 2008. I forget what year. And there's a drastic difference in the filmmaking.
Really?
Just because technology and what we can do with computers and ideas drastically changed, and technology changed so fast from year 2000, when it's like, okay, we're trying to get out of the 90s. And then all of a sudden, less than 10 years later, we're 2008, and there's cars doing crazy things and spaceships doing crazy things. And okay, we are solidly not in the 80s or the 90s anymore. And the 2008 started, and I feel like that era ended March 14th, 2020.
Yeah.
And now we're in a new one.
When did the fourth gen iPhone come out?
The fourth gen iPhone?
Yeah, like the iPhone 4, like the glass back one that a lot of people had. Can you look that up for us? Like, when did the iPhone come out? Like, yeah.
My first one was an iPhone 5.
Was
and
it?
I was in chiropractic school. I went to chiropractic school with a flip phone still.
Nice.
Or it was like a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
I don't know if I ever had one of those, like the 4s. I definitely had a 5, and that was like my senior year in high school, which was 2014.
Sure.
So, I mean, I feel like it was probably like that 2008. And I only say that because I feel like that was the time where the internet became a part of everybody's person. Like,
Right. You took it with you.
the cyborg thing. Like, I'm connected. I'm in the mainframe. June 2007.
Wow.
So 2008, people had the iPhone.
Wild.
People had the smartphone. I think that's it.
Yep.
I mean, talking about the change,
Sure.
the internet, information became accessible at every moment of every day. Different podcast that you sent me by Jocko was talking about the 5G coming in. And he talked about how it's like instantaneous connection to anywhere in the world, like any other computer, any other device, anywhere in the world, no latency. That's a crazy thought. Immediate connection with any place, anywhere. It changes things.
It does. And in addition to that is Starlink.
Yeah.
Which would be, free Wi-Fi for the entire world. Which means, information is getting to the corners and the depths where it has never gotten before.
Yeah.
You're going to bring everyone out of the dark age, per se. Everyone's in the light now. Everyone's connected. The Matrix is, wrapped the earth. I don't know what that'll be like. I don't know how much different that would be now,
So what that makes me think is like, maybe that won't be that different for us.
Right.
We're like used to it. But what's going to be like for people that are like living in huts? To skip the last 200, 300, 400 years. I know in America, it's not like we've just had industry for 400 years, but there's been major advancements in the last few centuries. To skip all of that and go from the Inuit tribes that we looked at Living History Farms, like living in these little pole buildings and teepees, to like 5G internet in a snap. What's that going to do to them?
Just having YouTube available for like how-tos, or how many people I talk to that, how'd you figure that out? Oh, I just YouTubed it. Like, everything's on YouTube just about, let alone, you want to figure out how to build something or get somewhere or do something. It's like, just YouTube. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. Is whatever knowledge you want,
Yeah.
Whatever message you want to send, done.
Even like talk about translation, like to overcome a language barrier in a moment, something that would have taken years of dedicated study before, done in an instant.
Thinking about the Indians coming across North America is what they struggled with, was communication, and somehow they bridged that barrier with no schematic to go on.
Right.
And now we're giving someone a schematic. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just interesting or if it's alarming in some way, or if there's, pitfalls. And that podcast that you're referencing was, they talked a lot about the pitfalls of being plugged in too much.
Right.
And what that does to a person and to society and to that person's network, and only having a network when you're plugged in. And so now we have this 5G and we'll have worldwide internet, but what happens when it goes down? And then it goes down for an extended period? Are you going to have people going through like withdrawals because they are so connected and they need it? Like, I take away your phone for 24 hours. How are you going to do? Good? Bad? Terrible? Like,
Right.
I think the more connected we are, again, you need to be prepared for the opposite. Would just be maybe a wise thing to do.
Did you notice the other day, like this week, one of the weekdays this week, the internet in Jefferson was down?
Yeah.
I had that thought when that went down. Like, I didn't like need it in the moment, but I thought to myself, like, how debilitating would it be to just take internet away? Like, how dependent are we all on the internet? And I'm not here trying to start some kind of like conspiracy theory or like some big thing like that. I'm just saying, like, when somebody takes it away and I can't live without it, I'm in a very vulnerable place, put it that way.
Sure.
And it just made me think about, well, everything. It's like entertainment comes from media. My connection to people can largely come from media. My connection to information, news sources, updates about the world comes from the internet and media. For work, most people, I think at this point, internet is a heavy effect.
Yeah.
Large part of the work. It's like, take all that away. You're in a vulnerable place.
Yeah.
So what do we just accept that and be okay with being vulnerable? Should we? I don't know. I'm not saying I have an answer. It's just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. Right. I don't even know. It's like, it's
like,
the
could
internet.
I live without it?
Yeah. And if you were willing and motivated to do that, the answer is yes.
Well, we know the answer is yes.
We could live.
We could, but would people? Would they still like be satisfied with life without it? Like, could I bear to live without it?
What a thought.
It's like the guy in self-isolation, kind of, because it's like, technically you can survive.
Right.
We're feeding you, kind of. You've got air to breathe, giving you water. No function is inhibited where you're unable. But I think it's the way you look at it. It's like, am I totally dependent? Am I unable to live without this, desire being met? It's an interesting thought.
It is really interesting, too, especially as in this decade you have kids who are growing up now never having known any other time, versus we can kind of remember a time where we had a set of encyclopedias in the basement, and if I had a homework problem or was doing English and I couldn't figure something out, my dad would say, well, go get an encyclopedia and look it up. And I looking back on it, I loved that process because, I don't know, it was fun.
Yeah.
But to go back to that,
It'd be different.
it would be different.
And
Yes.
it is a question of how many people would be able to. And I think that's where, almost the experience is so invaluable, because if a person, couldn't have the means to go and find it and learn it, to have a person that knows how to do the things that need done, it's just important. And maybe that's something that, if you don't know what to do, start doing something a lot of other people don't know how to. Wouldn't be a bad place to start.
To have a skill that is unique to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such as?
Well, this is probably a topic, and I know we're probably getting close to being out of time for this podcast, and not that we need to dive deep into this, but there's a large conversation to be had about higher education versus skilled labor in the country and the need for labor trades, physical work that has gone largely, I think, under people. Like they're not, I don't think there are enough people in some of those skills.
Sure.
And I think the price points reflect that. I know a little bit that those labor trades have like gone up significantly in price because there's fewer and fewer people that know how to do it. So like to get on the schedule for somebody, like I don't know if you've tried to book a construction project with like a contractor, but a lot of the time it's like, well, we'll get to you eventually, but we've got a lot of other things in the works already. Mm-hmm. So it's like there's fewer people doing it, market for it goes up. And the truth is, like, if we get outside the internet, it's almost like you have two places that people live and work and do everything. It's like the real world and then the internet, like the second world, the matrix world. And I think as more and more, people and jobs and skills go to the internet, it's like, well, now there's not as many in the physical world, and I think there's still just a need.
Right.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that there's a need for people having physical, abilities.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that there are people that are the other way too. I mean, my brother, he just graduated from Iowa State as a computer software engineer. So he's like, he's in that. He's in the internet and computers and, making all of that information and entertainment and all of that a reality and possible through his work. So that's a good thing. But
giant need for that right now. That's what I'm hearing anyway about. There's so much to manage now.
Sure.
But yeah, either you could say there's two types of jobs now. To break it down, you're either handling the system, working in the system, or you're, working with materials still.
Right. Like physical things or
cyber world versus material world jobs type of handling. Yeah.
And I think, back to the kind of the question that I think we've come back to over this podcast, like if I don't know what to do, do something.
Do something.
I'd say do something a lot of people don't do, whether that is cyber or material, start doing something.
Yeah.
Learn how to put a couple boards together, or learn how to program a simple, solution. I don't know. I think it's a good place to start, though.
Good place to start. Good approach to trying to survive in a world gone crazy. That was one thing that I had written down that just a conversation topic, and here we are. We've gotten it. How to survive in a life, in a society, in a world that's just different than it was. A new decade. Do something that a lot of other people aren't doing. Yeah. Good advice. Mm-hmm. Good advice, which we kind of vowed to keep our times down to around an hour.
We're trying this season. Hey, we didn't really talk about that. Would you like to for the last couple minutes we've got here?
We should break it down. And a lot of other podcasts and things out there, they do seasons or I suppose that'd be the way to call it. It's like all your TV shows are in seasons, So we have done 16 episodes so far, 16, which that will be season 1, and we'll try to go season 2 now, another 16 episodes, pretty much between now and Christmas, putting out one a week or as often as we can, And that'll be season 2 before we probably take a break again, reload, get some fresh ideas, get some fresh material. So I feel like a lot of times I would say some of the similar things. It's like, I need some fresh ideas. I need new stuff, more people to talk to. And so I think when we sat down and made our guest list, we've got a pretty exciting and pretty fun, entertaining, lots of wisdom people that we want to have on, and excited to get into that. Yeah, so season 2 is coming, and we're going to keep talking about relationships, health, resources, and your career, passion, pursuits, because those are, that's an approach to life, the 4 universal things that everyone should handle. Yeah. Because if you don't,
something's out.
Correct. Right. Something's out of whack. And so we're out to create balance through those 4 areas, which are super important. And I think the people that we're going to bring on all have a unique take and unique approaches to this. And that's what I want to know. I want to know What have you done in life? What worked? What didn't work? What would you tell somebody going through it right now? What would you do different? What are you going to do in the future?
Yeah.
Just storytelling. So I really hope we can pull out those stories from people because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Every single person has a unique story of where they've been, what they're doing, where they're going. And I'm fascinated by that. And I think that's what spoken word is all about. It's telling stories.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it. And, you know, thinking of the guests that we've got coming or planning to come this season, they're people that do stuff like we've talked about tonight. Like they do stuff. They're not to sit around and just wait for life to happen. They go out and make life happen. So I think that's fun because people who are out doing stuff, they've got stories to tell because they've been doing stuff. So it'll be fun to hear about what people are doing.
Yeah.
And what's working, like you said.
For sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun season.
It's good. Very fun. Season 2, episode 17.
That's a wrap.
This is good. This is a wrap. Having fun with it. We'll keep doing it. He's Isaac.
He's Philip.
We've been Unfiltered.
It was good catching up with you, man.
Yeah, it was. Good to sit down together again. Let's do it again next week.
All right.
All right.
We'll see you then.
Till then, adios.